4 astronauts just flew around the moon and came back with observations that no human has made in over 50 years. The things they described, from mysterious flashes on the lunar surface to terrain that made them question everything they thought they knew about our nearest neighbor, have set the internet on fire. So let's get into what the Artemis 2 crew saw out there. On April 1st, 2026, NASA's Space Launch System rocket lifted off from Launch Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 6:35 p.m. EDT, carrying 4 astronauts on a trajectory that would take them farther from home than any human being has ever traveled. The crew, Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialist Christina Koch from NASA, and mission specialist Jeremy Hansen from the Canadian Space Agency. These 4 people were about to become the first humans to travel to the moon's vicinity since Apollo 17 in December of 1972, more than half a century ago. The mission was called Artemis II. It was the first crewed flight of the Artemis program and the first crewed flight beyond low Earth orbit since Apollo 17. It was also the first time anyone had ever flown aboard both the Space Launch System rocket and the Orion spacecraft, which the crew named Integrity. After reaching space, the crew spent the first day checking out Orion's systems. Then, on day 2, the spacecraft's service module fired its main engine in an approximately 6-minute burn known as the translunar injection, accelerating Orion to break free of Earth's orbit and begin its outbound trajectory toward the moon. The moment that burn completed, something changed. For the first time since 1972, human beings had departed Earth orbit. 3 days later, on April 6th, things started to get interesting. Orion crossed into the lunar sphere of influence, the region of space where the moon's gravitational pull is stronger than Earth's. And at 1:56 p.m. EDT, the crew surpassed the distance record of 248,655 miles set by Apollo 13 in 1970. They didn't stop there. They kept going. By the time it was over, the crew reached a maximum distance from Earth of 252,756 miles, 4,111 miles farther than Apollo 13. Before they even started the formal observation period, Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen got on the radio and said something that would set the tone for everything that followed. "It is blowing my mind what you can see with the naked eye from the moon right now. It is just unbelievable." Then, moments after breaking that Apollo 13 record, something happened that nobody expected. The astronauts asked permission to name 2 fresh lunar craters they had already observed. One they proposed calling Integrity, after their capsule. The other, Carol, in honor of Commander Reed Wiseman's late wife, who died of cancer in 2020. Hansen choked up as he made the suggestion to Mission Control. Wiseman wept. All 4 astronauts embraced in tears. And then, they got to work. The lunar observation period began at 2:45 p.m. EDT on April 6th, and it lasted approximately 7 hours. 7 hours during which these 4 astronauts documented things that no human eye had observed at this proximity in more than 50 years. Some of what they captured, no human eye had ever observed at all. The crew had been rigorously trained for this window. Commander Wiseman and his crew were trained to document terrain features, note differences in color, brightness, and texture, and describe what they saw in real time. For the science team on the ground, they rotated through positions at the spacecraft's windows in carefully choreographed shifts, ensuring there were always fresh eyes scanning the surface. Back in Houston, the mission scientists gathered in the science evaluation room to advise and consult, updating the observation plan in real time. As the crew's reports streamed down, as Orion swept around the moon, the crew documented impact craters, ancient lava flows, and surface fractures. They photographed the Oriental Basin, one of the moon's youngest and best preserved large impact structures, and nearby they captured images of the heavily cratered terrain of the eastern edge of the South Pole Aitken Basin, the largest and oldest basin on the moon, providing a glimpse into an ancient geologic history built up over billions of years. They examined the Hertzsprung Basin, a nearly 400-mile-wide crater on the moon's far side, whose degraded features offered a stark contrast to the relatively pristine Oriental. But what made the observations truly valuable was what the astronauts could perceive that robotic cameras could not. The human eye, connected to a well-trained brain, is capable of making nuanced color observations in literally the blink of an eye, explained Kelsey Young, the Artemis II lunar science lead. The crew reported shades of browns and blues that can help reveal the mineral composition of a feature and its age. Hansen described one plateau as having unique, greenish hues, and added that he didn't see anything like it anywhere else on that side of the moon. Pilot Victor Glover noted that some peaks were so bright, they looked as though they were covered in snow. The three-dimensionality of the moon's surface overwhelmed the crew. Hansen said afterward, "Something that just shocked me is just the three-dimensionality of it." Geologist David Kring, who had trained all 4 astronauts in lunar geology, later explained that the elevation changes on the moon's south pole are greater than the elevation of Mount Everest on Earth. Looking at maps on paper had never captured the true scale, but from orbit, from the windows of integrity, the crew could finally see it. Kring said, "I could hear Victor finally getting it." The lively stream of science observations received from the crew was met with grins, nods, and lots of chatter in the science evaluation room. NASA's scientists were updating the observation plan on the fly, based on follow-up questions and sending new guidance back up to the crew. It was a live, collaborative scientific expedition, the kind that only human presence in deep space can produce. And then about 4 hours into the flyby, everything went dark. At 6:41 p.m. EDT, just 3 minutes before losing contact with Earth, the crew captured one of the most haunting images of the entire mission. As Orion traveled behind the moon, the crew witnessed an Earth set, the moment Earth dropped below the lunar horizon. In the foreground of the photograph, Ohm Crater is visible, with terraced edges and a flat floor interrupted by central peaks. Behind it, a partially darkened Earth sinks below the jagged lunar edge, its dayside revealing swirling clouds over Australia and Oceania. It was a deliberate echo of one of the most consequential photographs ever taken. During the Apollo 8 mission in December of 1968, astronaut William Anders grabbed a modified Hasselblad camera to snap the iconic photo now called Earthrise. That single image, Earth floating in the void above a barren moonscape, is widely credited with inspiring the modern environmental movement. Now, nearly 60 years later, the Artemis II crew was capturing that same perspective, from the opposite direction, producing an Earth set that showed our planet vanishing from view. Then, silence. The Orion spacecraft entered a planned communications blackout as it passed behind the moon. For about 40 minutes, the moon itself blocked all radio signals. Between the crew and NASA's Deep Space Network on Earth, the 4 astronauts were completely alone. No communication, no lifeline, no signal, just the 4 of them, their spacecraft, and the moon rolling beneath their windows. During those 40 minutes of radio darkness, Orion reached its closest approach to the moon at about 4,067 miles above the lunar surface. At that point, the spacecraft was traveling about 60,863 miles per hour relative to Earth, but only 3,139 miles per hour relative to the moon. And within those silent, isolated minutes, 2 minutes after closest approach, the crew reached the mission's maximum distance from Earth, at 252,756 miles, and then came Earthrise. The Artemis II crew witnessed an Earthrise as Orion emerged from behind the moon, moments before the Deep Space Network reacquired the spacecraft's signal. At 7:22 p.m. EDT, the crew captured an Earthrise through the Orion spacecraft window. Earth appeared as a delicate crescent, only its upper edge catching sunlight, with faint cloud systems visible along the illuminated arc. Along the lunar horizon, rugged terrain formed a jagged silhouette against the bright crescent of our home planet. Commander Wiseman would later reflect on what he'd said to his crew in that moment. "No matter how long we look at this, our brains are not processing this image in front of us," he radioed. After years of training, simulations, and planning, the reality of what they were seeing from 250,000 miles away defied description. But the most extraordinary part of the flyby was still ahead. As Orion emerged from behind the moon, the spacecraft, the moon, and the sun began to align in a way that produced something no astronaut had ever witnessed. Artemis II entered a solar eclipse that lasted for about an hour, as Orion, the moon, and the sun aligned. From the crew's vantage point inside Integrity, the moon appeared 5 times larger than the sun, creating a totality that dwarfed anything visible from Earth's surface. The crew experienced nearly 54 minutes of totality, an impossibly long eclipse by any earthly standard, offering an extended and unprecedented view of the sun's corona, glowing around the dark lunar disk. The crew had to don eclipse glasses during the partial phases, much like the ones worn by people on Earth to view solar eclipses, to protect their eyes until the sun was fully blocked. This was the first use of eclipse glasses at the moon to safely view a solar eclipse. Once totality set in, however, the glasses came off, and the crew stared at something no human had ever seen from this perspective. Pilot Victor Glover struggled to put it into words. He described the effect of Earthshine, Earth's reflected glow, illuminating the darkened lunar surface during the eclipse. After all of the amazing sights that we saw earlier, we just went sci-fi. Glover said, "You can actually see a majority of the moon. It is the strangest looking thing that you can see so much on the surface." He added that it had been difficult to fully capture what they were seeing with cameras. Wiseman followed up, "No matter how long we look at this, our brains are not processing this image in front of us." Glover simply called it a wicked view. Then the crew started seeing flashes. During the eclipse, as the moon's surface was cloaked in shadow, the crew reported 6 meteoroid impact flashes on the darkened lunar surface. These were flashes of light created by small space rocks, slamming into the moon at thousands of miles per hour. Brief, violent bursts of energy against the silent, airless surface. The moon has no atmosphere to shield it, so every incoming piece of debris strikes the ground at full speed, offering valuable data about the frequency and scale of such impacts. The reaction in Houston was immediate. Kelsey Young, the Artemis II lunar science lead, later revealed that members of the mission's science team were jumping up and down literally after the crew reported seeing 6 impact flashes. These observations are critical not just for science, but for safety. They could offer insight into potential hazards on the moon for the astronauts who will walk on the surface in the years ahead. The science team also noted a steadily blinking dot visible during the eclipse. In the upper left part of the screen, which NASA's science team confirmed was Venus, one of the brightest objects in the night sky. Stars that are normally too faint to see when imaging the moon became readily visible with the moon in darkness. The scientists are also still investigating whether the glowing halo around the dark lunar disk during totality was due to the corona, zodiacal light, or a combination of the two. In total, the crew used a fleet of high-powered Nikon cameras and even pulled out their iPhones for some impromptu shots, capturing thousands of images that NASA is still processing and releasing. Observations of the moon's south pole in particular could be used to pinpoint possible landing sites for missions to come, especially near craters thought to contain water ice. After 7 hours, Commander Wiseman thanked the NASA science team for putting together such an exciting observing program, as well as some great, truly human experience moments. The observation period was over, but the emotional weight of what they'd just experienced was only beginning to register. The return trip took 4 days. During the journey home, the crew completed a return correction burn, with the Orion spacecraft igniting its thrusters for 15 seconds, fine-tuning the trajectory for re-entry. They stowed equipment, reviewed re-entry procedures, and settled into a routine that mixed flight test objectives with quiet reflection. On Wednesday, April 8th, the crew held their first press conference from space, and it was during this call that Wiseman finally opened up about the crater naming moment. He revealed that his crewmates had approached him while they were in quarantine before launch, with the idea of naming a lunar crater after his late wife, Carol. "That was an emotional moment for me," Wiseman said. He said he gave them his approval, but told them he couldn't give the speech himself. When Hansen spelled out Carol's name for mission control during the flyby, Wiseman described what happened next. "I looked over and Christina was crying. I put my hand down on Jeremy's hand as he was still talking, and I could just tell he was trembling. And we all pretty much broke down right there." He called it the pinnacle moment of the mission. Coach described the Artemis missions as a relay race. "In fact, we have batons that we bought to symbolize physically that," she told reporters, "we plan to hand them to the next crew, and every single thing that we do is with them in mind." On April 10th, flight day 10, it was time to come home. The re-entry was the most dangerous phase of the entire mission. During re-entry, the service module separated about 20 minutes before Orion reached the upper atmosphere. The capsule hit the atmosphere at nearly 25,000 miles per hour, enduring extreme temperatures nearing 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. During a 6-minute communications blackout caused by plasma forming around the capsule, the crew experienced up to 3.9 Gs before the drogue parachutes deployed, followed by 3 main parachutes that slowed Orion for splashdown. At 8:07 p.m. EDT on April 10, 2026, the Orion spacecraft splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. Off the coast of San Diego, Mission Control in Houston erupted in cheers and applause. Wiseman radioed a simple status update. "What a journey, we are stable." 4 green crew members, meaning all 4 were in good shape. The next day, the crew returned to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, where they were welcomed home by family, friends, and colleagues. It was there, at Ellington Field, that the astronauts finally broke their silence. About what they had experienced, Wiseman told his crewmates, in front of the world, "We are bonded forever, and no one down here is ever going to know what the 4 of us just went through. And it was the most special thing that will ever happen in my life." He admitted that before launch, it had felt like the greatest dream on Earth. But once they were out there, 200,000 plus miles from home, all he wanted was to get back. Glover said he hadn't even begun to process the full scope of the mission. "The gratitude of seeing what we saw, doing what we did, and being with who I was with. It's too big to just be in one body," he said. Coach offered one of the most striking reflections. She said what struck her most wasn't just the sight of tiny Earth, but all the blackness surrounding it. "Earth was just this lifeboat hanging undisturbingly in the universe," she said. Then she paused, emotional, and added, "Planet Earth, you are a crew." Hansen captured the spirit of the journey with a phrase he and his crewmates had coined together. During years of training, the Joy Train, he told the audience, "We are a mirror reflecting you. And if you like what you see, then just look a little deeper. This is you." So what did the Artemis II astronauts really see on the moon? They saw impact craters billions of years old. They saw volcanic plains and fractures that record the moon's geologic life story. They saw shades of green and blue that no robotic camera had flagged. They saw 6 meteoroid impacts lighting up the darkened surface in real time. They witnessed a solar eclipse from behind the moon that lasted nearly an hour, revealing the corona, earthshine, and stars usually invisible in lunar imaging. They proposed naming craters and wept as a crew. But perhaps the most significant thing they saw was Earth, tiny, fragile, hanging in a universe of blackness, and they came home changed by it. With Artemis II complete, NASA now turns its attention to Artemis III, which will test integrated operations with commercially built moon landers in low Earth orbit, followed by Artemis IV, targeting a crewed landing near the moon's south pole in 2028. The relay race is on, and these 4 astronauts have already told us the batons are ready to be passed.